It scares me to love someone so completely and not have them love you back.
So, I've noticed this show getting a lot of praise recently. When I caught my fiance watching the first episode of You on Netflix, I slipped into the binge out of curiosity. I didn't have high hopes going in, but I powered through 10 oddly paced episodes that felt more like the writers just going through phases rather than allowing some of the plot lines to exist in the early stages of the show. And now I'm here trying to dig deep on a Lifetime premiere that rings true to its demographic, or rather the type of content Lifetime just likes to buy. And I honestly wish I could say this show exceeded the expectations of a Lifetime network premiere, or actually said something about its thematic plot points, like the dangers of social media and how fleeting encounters can spiral into cases of infatuation in regards to stalkers or quote-unquote nice guys. The show touches on so many themes with its situations and characters, but usually sells them short for recurring coincidences and distractions that feel cheap. As the narration continued to feel more forced, it reminded me of another cheap-ass show I'd catch my fiance watching from time to time.
I'd overheard enough conversations to be able to mimic the language of the Constance girls, but every writer needs his muse. And it wasn't until that photo of Serena in the white dress that I knew I had something strong enough to actually create a legend, launch a website.
And the entire show hinges on this forced narration. It's dropped on us as soon as the show starts. We hear Joe's thoughts as he swoons over Gwen Beck. We hear his awkward, cheeky jokes and judgments. At first, it almost feels like a case study on the modern psychopath, as advertised. The problem here is the show throws the main character to the wind too early. His stalker talk comes at us right out of the gates, and it's juxtaposed to the neighbor kid Paco's plot, which is a stereotypical drunken stepdad beats mom scenario.
It, you unbelievable bastard!
That is it! I'm gonna shut you up once and for all!
You put that
Now get
down.
your hands off me! Get out!
Oh yeah, books are an ongoing theme with this show, and most of the time it feels really forced. I know the guy's been conditioned by his father to respect books and all that, but all the book references mainly used as foreshadowing devices feel forced or obvious in that aspect. Especially when Joe hands off a copy of Frankenstein to Paco and says something about how the story's monster is misunderstood.
So what if I'm the monster?
So in the midst of this story, we get all these ideas about monsters and chivalry and human decency and addiction and the risk of getting involved in other people's lives and so on. But these themes never really arrive anywhere. Another huge issue with this show is the pacing. I feel like it has something to do with the show runtime and the 10-episode standard, ultimately leading up to one of those second acts that drag on kind of like Jessica Jones. We get several hints about Joe's past in the beginning, but they're not explored again until the last 2 episodes. Same deal with the Candace story, mostly just hints until we get development way later on in the plot. The Benji plotline takes off in the first episode, but he's dead by the 3rd episode. We're kind of led to believe that Joe is incapable of being sloppy, that he's cool and calculated, but once the whole dead body trope falls in place, the show starts to feel more like a dark comedy/romance rather than a serious drama with stakes. For example, Joe attempts to preserve Benji's rotting corpse in the basement of his bookstore by plugging in a bunch of AC units. When he inevitably leaves the body unattended, Joe gets a call from the big comic relief character, who is really underused by the way, and tells him the power is blown out and that they need to get in the basement to reset the fuse box or whatever. Joe makes some remark about how he knew this would happen by doing that, which raises the question as to why he even did it in the first place if he was actually afraid of getting caught. And that's kind of when it all hit me, as Joe tries to haul this hastily wrapped corpse out to his car in the middle of New York, and we get one of those, oh no, there's a dead guy in a car and I've got to hide him in plain sight situations. So we've had all these problems welling up while the main character is trying to get closer to Beck, and even when it's all about to blow up, it doesn't really feel like the stakes matter. And then I was reminded of a show where this shit did matter, where the intensity and suspense of these kinds of situations actually made me side with and worry about the character, and it feels really familiar.
Surprise, motherfucker.
And that really seems to be the consensus for those who remember Showtime's Dexter. I've heard so many people compare you to Dexter already. It was a show with a lot of the same themes, except the main character was extremely likable while actually being a cheeky serial killer on the verge of capture each season. It actually touched on the psychology of bloodlust and how killers rationalize their actions. And yes, I know the later seasons of Dexter aren't perfect, but I still think the show really nailed that Julia Stiles arc in season 5. And I really think that would have been the best ending for that show. It just feels like they were reaching in the last seasons. But anyway, this is kind of how You misses the darker aspects of what it's trying to portray and kind of slips into comedy. Whereas Dexter was self-aware of its comedic moments and how to shift the tone in darker situations, You feels off-kilter on both sides. It's so hard to tell when the one-liners from characters like Peach are actually meant to be funny or just push her deeper into the rich New York girl stereotype. Later on, Joe tries to off Peach by smashing her fucking head with a brick. We get this really sudden and violent shot of her going down and hemorrhaging in the park. And then she's perfectly fine, like I think within the next episode. No stitches or anything, and she's just back to fuck with Joe. And then we get scenes in Peach's mansion where Joe is hilariously tiptoeing around, pissing in jars while trying to spy on his girlfriend Beck and friend, love interest, stalker, whoever she is, Peach. I couldn't stop laughing at these parts considering how odd they were for the tone of the show overall. These moments of Joe pretending to be Solid Snake with a concussion and getting into a standoff with Peach are sort of the midway climax for the show. This climax is followed up by a strange sequence of episodes leading up to the conclusion of the season. There's a romantic episode where Joe comes to terms with his insecurity for Beck without really learning any real lesson. It's another episode with a lot of cringe moments that don't really convey the danger of Beck's situation. And honestly, it kind of sucks because Beck has the best arc in the show. She is, after all, the focus of everyone's attention in the entire show. She has a ton of character development with her friends, creepy professors, her father, and it culminates to some weird shit about, I guess I have daddy issues, and pseudo-profound realizations that life isn't going to play out like the fairy tales. She doesn't even get the idea that she might be in danger really until the last few episodes. And then it's pretty much too late. I think it would have worked a lot better if they would have built that sort of tension and danger between the two characters. Just kind of with her getting little hints of suspicion along the way and not so much just a big reveal like it was. Also, the second half of this show is where the Dexter plagiarism really starts to reflect badly on the writers. Some of this is just ripped right out of the first season of Dexter without any regard for the fact that people still remember Dexter very well. Hell, fans have been demanding a reboot of the show since it went off the air in 2013. Nonetheless, You sloppily adapts the episode's shrink wrap from Dexter, that's from season 1, so that Joe has someone else to kill, I guess? Basically, it's the same exact idea as this Dexter episode. Joe cases the therapist and says he needs more evidence before he kills him for sleeping with Beck. So Joe sneaks into his office and looks at John Stamos' laptop to discover recorded sessions from his other patients, which includes Beck. This is exactly what happens in that Dexter episode, except he's casing for a girl who committed suicide. And I really don't like the connotation that these characters might be alike in any way. Joe is kind of this weird pussy boy who gets all of his intel from social media and Beck's hacked iPhone account. He kills when one guy uses Beck for sex, but then acts completely fine about it when he finds out about her Tinder hookups and literally catches her in the act because she hates curtains or something. It's inconsistent, Unlike Dexter, who uses his position inside the Miami police force to stay ahead of police themselves and identify killers and case them without getting sloppy in most cases. And when Dexter does actually get sloppy, it's an actual part of his character arc. It's something he reflects on and struggles to rationalize. So then we get some sort of, I don't know, twist. Basically, it's the whole Dexter adopted father scenario, which we kind of get some of that in the first few episodes, where the mentor dad knows the kid is sick, so he teaches him his serial killer code. I mean, seriously, I know it's not the same as Harry's code in Dexter. I get that these characters don't have the same focus of morality, but that's some lazy shit if you ask me. It's kind of portrayed as a surprise, even though we see how abusive the father figure situation is from the get-go. The reveal feels kind of tucked away near the end of the show to hide that kind of blatant plagiarism, and I really feel like this writing can't be coincidence. Even when it feels like the writers could have said something about Joe's impulsiveness, the sloppiness of his overall situation, or some kind of emotional karma for his actions that could have got bestowed upon him. No, we never get that. He gets over it and he basically just kills Beck. And then there's another twist that really wasn't developed well either, but whatever. All in all, I can't say I absolutely hated You in its entirety. It feels like the writers could have explored more ideas with their subject matter, and I was hoping this show would convey something about modern romance or social media, stalking, misogyny, but the narrative just gets bogged down with coincidental plot devices and sporadic pacing. The Dexter ripoffs really bug me, especially when I get the idea that the writers of this show don't really understand a character like Dexter. And with all the smart thriller crime shows that have launched since Breaking Bad's rise to popularity, you'd think the writers of You would be a little more careful with their narrative. Compared to some of the other content that's streaming right now, You falls short of feeling like a high-stakes drama due to an unfocused tone and questionable acting. I seriously think this show would have been really, really good as a dark comedy that kind of pitted Beck's love interests against each other over a longer sequence of episodes. Sort of how like the show like Sick Note gets messier as the characters edge into more precarious situations, yet the plot and stakes established in early episodes span an entire season and feel planned out. But anyways, I'm going to give this one 5 out of 10. There's a lot of cringe moments and unintentionally funny moments, which I actually enjoyed. The stakes don't feel grounded and the second half is really slow. I'd say just do yourself a favor and just rewatch the first season of Dexter instead, and if you haven't seen it before, it's still on Netflix.